saying, Jeremy called me and said he was having some internet issues in Detroit. He should be on here any minute, but thank you to those of you that are already here attending this week's episode Now Next Later. Unfortunately, I think you're forced to deal with me again. Sasha Stair was supposed to co-host this week, but she got called into an executive meeting for one of her clients. So I will join Jeremy again. He may just go on a monologue for 45 minutes. Nobody knows. I was in the dark. Was supposed to be hosting in the background. I spoke with him on the phone 6 or 7 minutes ago. Oh, looks like he's here. Mr. Potter. Holy smoke.
Robbie, it looks like you. It looks like logo's better than my logo. Got to like move around here to get more than. At least Next is on there. That looks pretty good.
Well, I can't even see your face.
Uh-oh.
If you're in, oh, there we go.
Oh, well, that's not good.
Well, why don't you turn your phone sideways and see what happens? Try
I
that.
I can see yours. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Robbie for setting us up here. Now Next Later, episode 2. Does that work better for you? You get ow next later.
Oh, I said turn your phone sideways. You're supposed to be like a tech forward millennial. Actually, you're kind of Gen X, aren't you? But turn your phone
Elder
sideways. It
millennial.
shows the full
I'm an
logo.
elder millennial.
All right, elder millennial,
That's what I
turn your
just
phone
did.
sideways. See what happens.
I did. I did 10 seconds ago.
All right. Well, you're a little choppy for me. Hopefully the internet gets better, but
Fingers crossed.
I told the audience the last thing anybody wanted to see was my bearded face. I'm supposed to be in mountain man mode on vacation. But like Kirk Gibson in the 88 World Series, I was called in the bottom of the ninth.
You were.
The crowd goes,
Nice.
"Oh."
Thank you for doing that.
What are
I
we
think the
talking
crowd's
about
going to
today?
love it. So Now Next Later is a show for those that joined us last week. Thank you for anyone just joining or watching this recording. You know, we really want to talk through product development, uh, how you think about strategic decision making, and anything new that's coming at you in mortgage, real estate, and title. It seems we've struggled as an industry with really two key things: transactional mindset and continuing to silo real estate, mortgage, and title as three separate things. So at Now Next Later, we wanted to do two things, and we're going to start here with the conversation on technology implementation. But it is to break out of the transactional mindset and make decisions holistically and forward facing, but without making dramatic assumptions about what your business is capable of. We're not trying to say you have to immediately move from A to Z with some very sophisticated either tech play, AI play, or product development roadmap. Certainly, if there's opportunity to bring on innovators, we're going to talk to them about that. But the idea is, how do we make decisions today, now, that have a reasonable step in the right direction next, and then ultimately get you where you're trying to go later? So today, Robbie, one of the things I want to talk to you about, one of the things I wanted to bring up was everybody's trying to make decisions about what the next tool is or what the next technology advancement is that they're going to include in their business pretty much all day, every day. Right? There isn't a Chrisman commentary newsletter that I've seen in the past 10 years, even where there isn't a POS, CRM, LOS, closing platform, some opportunity for somebody to come in and help your business move forward. So what we're hearing from lenders is that's really confusing. What do I choose? How do I choose? Can somebody just give me who the best practices are? Can somebody just give me who the leading vendors are in each category? And everybody's hesitant to do that for obvious reasons. I think consultants come in and they have to learn your business. I think other platforms that would actually rate vendors are hesitant to do it because of the trustworthy factor and the willingness to work with you in the future. Like if I alienate a vendor, how's that going to look for my business? Or if I, say something about a vendor that is uh, maybe even true, but not as um, as diplomatic as this industry likes to be, then maybe future vendors wouldn't want to work with me, or maybe I'll be working with them at another job in the future. And so there's all these politics at play. This isn't unique to our industry. This is every industry. And so today's conversation, I wanted to be more about, if I was running a mortgage company in 2024, what should I have already been thinking about? And I think a lot of our listeners probably have spent the last 9 months deciding what to implement next. We're going to try to understand in today's conversation who is where on the technology roadmap, and then maybe some recommendations for, if I was making a decision today, what should I be planning for next? And what would be the way I make a good technology partner decision, technology platform decision that lets me grow into it? What does growing into it even mean in this transactional up and down market with refi and purchase? And so I'll just start there with, how do you make a technology implementation roadmap work for you? And that will be our now. And so I'll pause there to let you weigh in with your, imagine that was, you stepped in the box, you're Kirk Gibson, you stepped in the box. That's first pitch.
Well, my mind goes, do you separate a business to business technology implementation versus a business to consumer technology implication, or are they one and the same? Do you view it as kind of step A and then step B? How should we be thinking about it?
I think certainly the map of what touches the consumer versus what is completely under the hood is an important map to have, to think about, okay, what are my LOs interacting with versus what are my LOs introducing consumers to that they interact with, and where should I think about making efficiency advances, A, to answer your question. And then B, I think the other key thing is, what is the go live date look like when I do have something that is going to have to be a net new screen workflow or ask of consumers versus my own team members? Fundamentally, I mentioned earlier kind of the big four areas: POS, CRM, LOS, and closing, that we can talk about discrete opportunities underneath them, especially within an LOS. You can have 47 different vendor partners underneath your LOS. But let's talk for a second about who sees what. The consumer facing piece of, say, a POS is actually the easiest to change, because you can redirect consumers by just swapping out a URL. And all the new consumers coming in didn't even know there was a landing page that was different yesterday than tomorrow. So I think for consumer facing tech, we've gotten really good as an industry, and the overall technology community has gotten really good about consumer user interfaces. Consumer user interfaces are relatively easy to create. They're easy to change. Nobody's really struggling with, like, how do I make this look purple instead of green? Or how do I move this button to a more visible location so they click it before they have to read more? Or how do I move around certain things? Like, that's a commodity. And a lot of people in-house at lenders can do that work, or you can contract out pretty easily just to have the consumer's screen look different. I think the key question, the really tough question, becomes, what do I do with what I'm collecting? Once they're clicking through, once they're putting that data in, that B2B technology piece is, I think, where we should spend the most time, because I think that's the toughest question for lenders to answer, is like, how am I doing anything differently once I have the data? Once I have my team members working on a new tool or with a new efficiency. So that, to me, it's the B2B that is more complicated.
Well, since you asked the question, are you going to answer the question? If it's the most difficult one out there, thank goodness we have Jeremy Potter, mortgage extraordinaire, to give us all the answers here. Tell the people what you're thinking.
Well, I think the two steps that we recommend, the very first step is, and this is where I want to reference what I said earlier, where are you in the process? How much work have you done over the last year as the market changed? versus where you find yourself in summer 2024. We think that the first thing you should do is audit your existing technology for capabilities. Do you have redundancies? And do you have technologies that actually all maybe do a lot of the same things? So when you go to add something new, before you add something new, there's a question of like, why are we doing this? Why are we adding something new? One of the things that you and I talk about a little bit is how can companies, especially lenders, be more honest about what business they're in. And so I heard this last week. I'm going to restate it here, but I think it's really helpful. Are you in the referral business or are you in the experience business? If you're in the referral business, your customer is your LO. And I think we've seen a lot of industry conversation about how do I serve my LOs better? What tools do my LOs need? I think you'll hear consternation sometimes from operations and technology within a lender, which is like, why are we doing this again? Or why are we adding this new technology? To me, it's never been a problem to add technology to make an LO happy or make a branch manager happy, as long as you're honest about it. So as long as you're saying, hey, look, I don't care if this is redundant. I don't care if it does something that 2 or 3 other pieces of my platform do. I need it for this reason, and this reason is more important than efficiency, so I'm choosing it. I don't know if I'm asking too much there, so that's kind of an open question to the audience. It's an open question to you, Robbie. But I would really say, like, if I'm in the referral business, my customer is the LO, and that's pretty clear. And we should be honest about that.
Yeah, and I'm almost thinking since we divide this show up into the now, next, later, we're talking about the now. What is the optimal customer experience currently? We can get into how it can improve later, but for modern times, who do you see at the forefront of that? What are they doing well, and how can other companies kind of emulate that?
Okay, so what I would say is companies that are in the referral business, meaning they drive the vast majority of their sales pipeline through LO referrals and referral networks, they don't care about consumer experience from a technology interface perspective. They can't care about it because they have to care about what the LO uses, how the LO uses it, and keeping their LOs happy. To keep their real estate partners happy, and B, to not leave and walk across the street to another lender. So if you're in the referral business, almost all of your time, effort, and energy, whether you're honest about it or not, goes to your branches and your LOs. The optimal consumer experience is not yet achieved, I would say, anywhere in the industry. And the reason is the consumer still has to bounce between pieces of the transaction and platforms in the transaction to get what you and I call done. So I still need to search real estate and look for a house on one platform, apply for a mortgage and track my financing conditions on another platform, and then get in touch with the settlement agent, get my title insurance, and close on a third platform. And that's even before we're talking about income or bank integrations where I need to upload my income through Plaid or Finicity or one of those. That's before I may have to interact with credit. Maybe I pull my credit through a different POS than the LOS or something like that, depending on how digital your platform is. So for today's consumer, the now, that consumer is playing hopscotch across the experience of buying a home that causes them to have to jump, bounce, balance, and keep everything in front of their face. We're not doing. I mean, I don't think anybody's figured that out.
If only there was a company that was doing something like that. Oh, wait, you and I are actually working.
Listen, yeah, I think there are plenty of companies that see the future, right? So let's talk now, next, later. Now it is, I see the problem, I want to address the problem. Next is, it feels like, I'm saying feels because we're still looking for the kind of market scale, and I don't mean nationwide, I just mean within a region, for a consumer to have that experience under one roof. But it feels like what next would be is I can actually see a singular dashboard of the process. So one thing I joke about that I think has been very influential in mortgage, weirdly, is the Domino's pizza tracker. Domino's creates this pizza tracker, and suddenly that is the standard of innovation for real estate and mortgage companies to be like, boy, I wish we had that. It's like, it's a pizza tracker. I think you can have it. But we haven't yet seen tracking extend. So I'll give you some names. You were talking earlier about like who's doing it. Just from tracking, you can have like a Rocket Mortgage or a Better tracking your loan. Where's my loan right now? And what do I owe on it? What are my conditions? And that actually only lasts up to clear to close. You can have closing platforms. One that comes to mind would be like a Qualia, something like that, that is tracking the closing. So now I'm clear to close, but I haven't yet signed. They have a tracker with 3 or 4 milestones to get there. If you zoom back out of the non-digital platforms, you've got like an Encompass, which has an internal milestone list. I know internally what my milestones are. It's got a lot of trackers going on that are limited in scope, but we don't have a lot of platforms that are giving the consumer a single dashboard. So I would think of a platform that's trying to get at something like this would be Open Door, Home Run, as an example of one that you were referring to a second ago. I think those types of platforms are actually trying to weave together real estate into mortgage, haven't yet told us what closing looks like, but weaving together even the closing in there. I think you're starting to see with Zillow thinking about how Zillow Home Loans is going to factor into their platform. We don't know. I haven't seen any actual market activity that would tell you other than them spending on advertising. And then you have like a CoStar, which is trying to win the real estate arm and doesn't seem at all to be focused on mortgage and title and closing yet. So there are big national well-funded players that have brand names, and then there are these small kind of more startup-y Bay Area tech focus. But I think the overall message to the mortgage industry is that's who you're competing with in the experience category. Who you're competing with in the referral category is just each other, who you've always competed with. And that's one of the reasons the traditional IMBs, traditional banks are so loath to change anything, because how do I even make the jump from a referral company to an experience company? And then all of a sudden I'm competing with the names that we just mentioned. So we see a lot of people saying, no, I'm not, I can't create a roadmap to get to experience later. I'm just going to stay in the referral business and I'm going to see how long I can stay in that business.
Are they mutually exclusive? You make it sound like they are, but I would venture to say they aren't necessarily.
I want somebody to make that argument to that how they're not, because you split your investments and you split your focus that way, I think it gets really dicey inside your business because it's hard to make prioritization decisions with limited resources. It's hard enough to get lenders to adopt technology today. So how do you get technology funded and adopted when you're trying to do a little bit over here for LOs and a little bit over here for consumers and a little bit that's the UX of the platform and a little bit that's LO tools? I mean, what we've actually seen in that regard is that most lenders have, multiple CRMs to make all the LOs across the country happy, maybe even multiple point of sale solutions, but let's say they even have one point of sale solution. So how do you invest in a point of sale solution to make customers happy, a bunch of CRMs to keep your LOs happy, and then do you make any investments in the LOS? Because neither LOs or consumers should see that. And so if you're trying to do both, you're actually probably doing a major disservice to those 3 areas, because you're just trying to take already limited resources, already limited tech bandwidth, and spread it across things that are not consistent.
So as longtime listeners of this show will know, you are the theoretical and I am the practical. And I want to bring this to the practical side of things and get you down out of the clouds from time to time. how far are we from an ideal, or not even how far are, what will it take for companies to get to what you view as a seamless process? And yeah, how far are we from that? I've heard the phrase push button, get mortgage for a decade now, but it obviously doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think that um, there's one now question that is important to how close we are, and that is I'll leave it to you to answer, and then we'll see. Would you treat purchase and refi as the same process? And if not, are they even the same thing? If you're doing, can you even
No,
apply
but I
technology
think
or process to each of them?
a lot of companies already treat them as separate processes, which, well, I'm
Okay.
in favor of.
So, so how close are we to push button get mortgage on a refi? I think we're actually pretty close
I think pretty
from a
close too.
consumer expectation perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can, if you're doing a lender to lender, meaning lender to the same lender refi, freedom to freedom, rocket to rocket, et cetera, et cetera. If you're doing that type of refinance and it's rate and term, you're simply lowering the rate and going back to a 30-year term. I think we're pretty close. And it really comes down to the consumer's comfort with putting in their bank information to ingest in. That's what we're talking about for push button get mortgage. I think the problem becomes a lot of what we're talking about to make consumers happy involves their first home or their next home. So one issue I ran into at Rocket, now this is going back 5 years, was 88% retention on refis. And those same customers didn't think of Rocket, excuse me, sorry. Those consumers didn't think of Rocket when buying their next home or buying a second vacation property, investment property, whatever. And so I think what we've seen, like I'll use this as a I'll use this as a data point for those customers.
I think your Wi-Fi just kicked back in, Jeremy. You look
I'm
clear again.
back.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Great.
Good.
Well, I'm going to try to move to a spot where that doesn't happen again. But if I'm back and I'm clear and I'm making a good point, which is the
Yeah.
third thing you didn't say, but I'm asking. Yeah. So here's
You
what I
want me
would
to
say,
tell you?
Robbie.
You want me to tell you if I think you're making a good point?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what this show's all about.
the acknowledgement is in the mail. Hold your breath.
And I would say the second piece is Alan, you can tell us because I saw your comment here and I want to bring that up next. But what I would say about home purchase versus refi, like there's a company you asked who's thinking about this experience and who's doing it. There's a company called Tomo that started just on home purchase. And my view was the fact that that company feels like it needs to exist and the fact that that company feels like it can win on just purchase alone is an indicator of how hard it is for existing lenders to do both purchase and refi in a clean, seamless way. So we're close on certain refis for push button get mortgage. We're really far away from a net new refi capture and from purchase being anywhere near consumer expectation.
So I was looking at Alan's question in the chat, and I assume it's rhetorical, Alan. I appreciate you chiming in. His question was, do you think loan officers are happy if the company's consumer experience is bad? I would kind of add some caveats to this and say, one, no, obviously the answer is no, they wouldn't be happy. But how do they know? Because they might hear that all this, this grandiose, seamless experience, efficient experience exists out there, and it doesn't. So they could assume that their company's experience is bad, but relative to others in the industry, it isn't. Obviously, I would love for the industry to get to a place where it's a seamless experience, push button, get mortgage, as an example. But if nobody's really there, then what we perceive to be a bad customer experience, at least relative to other industries like Amazon or maybe a Tesla order, something like that, isn't actually bad. Is that a weird way for me to look at it, Jeremy? Am I giving the industry too much slack here? It's like just because everybody stinks doesn't mean it's okay for you to stink.
Well, no, I think the key question I think the key question here is average to your peers sufficient for your goals? If hey, I'm average just like everybody else, and then you're competing on something else, is that sufficient for your goals? If the answer is yes, then to your point, you're actually fine, because my goals are to win business other ways. The fact that it's less appealing, but so's everybody else's experience, has, I think, caused the deprioritization of innovation at times when we could have done it, right? So I get it. When the interest rate shifts and it's 2020 and you just have to survive, A, COVID workplace changes, and B, historically low rates like we've never seen, you can't necessarily be carving off 10% of time or resources to do research and development on fixing things when you actually have the resources to do it. But if you come out of that experience and don't then commit any resources to research and development or to improving this process to try to make that a differentiator for next time, then you are committing your business to just being the same as everybody else all the time. And I think that's what I would suggest the bridge from now to next is you have to decide whether you care about that. That's a threshold question. Do I care if my experience is any different? If you're a lender who signed up with Blend 3 or 4 years ago, you didn't care that it was any different. You knew you were getting the exact same experience as the market. Okay, that was the thing you weren't going to compete on. Great. So I think sometimes people, I assume that if you're not going for the flashiest new consumer facing thing, that's somehow an indication that you're not an innovative company or you're not a growth minded company. I think what I'm saying is I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the best place you can be is being honest about what kind of company you are and then reflecting your decisions accordingly. If you're not going to compete on consumer experience, fine. What are you competing on? What are you giving your LOs that makes them really happy if it's not what the consumer sees and touches and feels?
So last week, you and I went 30 minutes. I'm not sure if you wanted to go the full 45 this week or leave this conversation for Sasha. Uh, do you, do you want to get into the next and the later? Do you want to save that for Sasha? Where's your head?
Let's do this, especially given the fact that I have been fuzzy and now clear throughout this process. Let's start to wrap it up. Let No, I just meant in the visual, not in my hopefully not in my points. But let's start to wrap it up with this, Robbie, which is you've made the decision at some point in the last 24 months, last 6 months. Ideally, if you haven't made the decision, you're making it this summer about what your focus is. My company is a blank company. We are a LO based referral company. We are a digital consumer experience company, or we're taking our company from here to here, and we're this company today, and we're going to try to become this type of company later. If you're in that decision making process, I think the biggest thing you have to do is understand the competitive landscape for what you just defined yourself as. If you are trying to move forward in a traditional referral model, I think you're actually trying to build as much of a infrastructure and team mindset around your LOs, giving them tools to create their little ecosystem that creates a mini company within a company for each branch, for each LO, for each region, so that they can start to have their own realtors with visibility in their system, their own consumers, their own closing, all kind of within their sphere of control, because there are tools that do that. There are tools that allow you to create a mini team within your company so that it feels to the consumer like real estate, mortgage, and title are all talking to each other, all working together. based on the mortgage company's technology. You're committing to a referral type business, but you're saying long term, I'm just going to make it look as much as I can like these three entities, real estate, mortgage, and title, are all coordinated, knowing that the center of it is my LO, and I'm not willing to go away from that for the next 5 years. Alternatively, you can start to give technology to consumers earlier and earlier, give your links and your LO dedicated sort of pages. You can give those out to other platforms or to consumers earlier and earlier. So before they're ready to buy, before they're even shopping, start to get their data flowing. And then over time, start delegating more and more of the manual tasks to your technology so that if you ever needed to, you can become an experienced business later. You're not an experienced business today. You're trying to get there. You have to start with one piece at a time and say, okay, starting tomorrow, we're going to give out our pre-qualification workflow, our pre-qualification link to more and more digital places on the web, to more and more places where consumers live on the web. And we're going to start a drip campaign that actually nurtures them. And then when they're ready, we're still going to deliver them to an LO, potentially. We're still going to go in the traditional model. But you've started the process now, and then move from pre-qualification to pre-approval, move from pre-approval to maybe you're already underwritten as you're shopping, as you're looking. So you can shift your business from a referral business to an experience business. You got to start at the very beginning. You got to start with consumer data, and you have to build the ecosystem around them. Those are the two decisions you have to make about if you're a referral business or an experience business.
I'm almost chuckling over here because I'm thinking, how can we even discuss the later when companies aren't even really doing the now correctly? Let alone the later. How can we even discuss the next? Like, companies need to get to the now, which is funny to me. I don't necessarily need you to address that because I'm much more cynical than you are in nature. Go ahead.
I'll just have one comment. So we talked about now. I just described next. I think the later is, I use a lot of what can we learn from other consumer facing industries that teach us about mortgage and real estate. Here's what I would use. I would use credit card as the example. Credit card figured out a way to get your limit, whatever your credit limit is, into your phone's wallet. And now I have my 2 or 3 credit cards in my phone with my limit. I know my buying power, and I'm able to spend just like that. My view is a digital credit limit for mortgage is what first-time home buyers expect. I think it's even what move up, downsize, and investment property buyers would expect. How do you start to get pre-approvals to move from a letter that you can edit and print off as a PDF to being a digital delivery of credit to your consumer? So later looks like a better pre-approval, a stronger pre-approval that still could be delivered through an LO, or it could be delivered digitally, but now you're actually working in a purchase landscape that gives realtors certainty, gives consumers visibility, and whether or not you use LOs in the same way as you've always used them. Now we're talking about later being really, really practical use of credit that people understand.
What are you doing talking to me about this versus building this yourself?
Oh, I'm ready to build it myself for anybody out there that wants to talk about it. Here's the thing. There has been a lot of skepticism about you mentioned Amazon earlier, who's next, and why a VC would want to invest in a build that actually does change this if other entities are ahead on the consumer brand recognition. Because this is a consumer facing industry, consumer brand recognition is really expensive and hard to control. So we've talked a lot about the technology under the hood for referrals and LOs versus consumer experience, but we haven't talked a lot about the cost of going direct to consumer, and that tends to be a big obstacle for investors.
You want to talk about that? Do
So
you want to answer Alan's question? Where do you want to
if
go?
you already have it, So my point, Robbie, is not why am I not building it? My point is if you already have brand recognition, if you already have regional or national footprint, then you're already way ahead of where somebody like me building it could get to. But if you don't think about later and you're stuck in the now, there's no future there. So that's my point. Is like you're ahead of these other types of VC backed creators, but you're not going to be ahead for very long if you don't think about these roadmaps to how you plan for what's next.
That's good. I feel like that's good advice for me thinking about what I want to do with the media empire here. So
So
thank you for
Chrisman
that.
Media, now, next, later, we can do that too.
Well, that's going to be offline, not for public dissemination. But
Well,
the
thank you for, yeah, thank you for being here, especially on short notice and walking through episode 2 of Now Next Later. I really appreciate
sure.
it, Robbie.
Do you let's address Alan's second question quickly. I think it's
Okay.
a valid one. Well, so
Q&A. Thank you, Alan. Appreciate
yeah,
it. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, Alan, appreciate you tuning into the show and asking questions in the chat. He wants to know if a experienced business can remove the MLO. And Jeremy, I think you're going to give a much more measured answer than I will, because my inclination is to go
Oh,
and
interesting.
my inclination is to say with technology, maybe I've been sipping too much tech Kool-Aid here, but with technology, the MLO has been reduced to a data entry specialist. And yes, there is an element of relationships to any origination, more so in purchase than refinance. And customers or borrowers, potential borrowers, want to feel like someone's holding their hand and someone's looking
Mm-hmm.
out for them. But I would
Mm-hmm.
argue through education in general and technology, MLOs, which are the largest expense in the entire process of originating a loan, are becoming obsolete by the day. Maybe you could argue it's mortgage brokers more than MLOs, but I think both are becoming obsolete. And so, my rather than just being cynical for the sake of being cynical, my mind goes, how can these groups of individuals add value now next? Maybe we can talk about that on a different show. Now next later, the value of the LO or value of the broker. Uh, but how do these groups continue to provide value so that they maintain relevancy in the process? Where's your head go,
Yeah.
Jeremy?
No, I think it is a good topic for a longer discussion, but my head goes to this idea, which is for now, we still have certain questions that have to be answered by a licensed person. And that licensed person is going to be an MLO, whether they're digital through chat, on the phone, or some other method of communication that is going to be around for things like product and pricing, and particularly rate lock. Early on at Rocket Mortgage, when it launched, first-time homebuyers loved getting pre-approved after business hours. A lot of first-time homebuyers loved using Rocket Mortgage to get pre-approved or to see their credit limit, and it was always at night, it was on weekends, and stuff like that. But the biggest area of inquiry for chat or for a phone call in a fully digital process was at rate lock. Should I lock? Should I lock? What are the implications if I don't? How long can I wait until I lock? Those can be frequently asked questions by a bot or an FAQ screen, to your point, Robbie, but there still is a role there. So could you go fully digital? Absolutely. Do we think you're going to go from now to later fully digital? No. We think there's going to be a step in between where there's a call center or some sort of chat function where a licensed person is just walking you through kind of the 3 to 5 questions that most consumers have and will probably continue to have for a short period of time. And I will say with one more caveat for what could happen in the future, I think those questions can be answered in a variety of different ways. So I'm suggesting having some MLOs behind your digital experience ready to answer chat questions and ready to pick up the phone, probably a good idea. But I also think consumers believe that the real estate agent should quarterback the transaction. And so there will be this weird moment of a real estate agent who isn't licensed for mortgage getting questions in a digital experience and needing to rely, at least from this regulatory regime until that changes, needing to rely on someone who is licensed. It might be them in certain states if they have dual license, or the ability to push to a licensed chat function or a licensed text function. There will be a need for that in the short run because that next step is still bound by licensing requirements from 10 years ago.
It almost makes me think that the future is a lock desk having a licensed individual or two that can do customer service.
Right.
But
That's a great example.
maybe that's
That's
a
right.
little too, I cut my teeth in capital markets, and obviously you have these friction points, shall we say, with originators. So maybe that's wishful thinking on my part to think they will go away. I mean, I know, and I've said this before on other shows, I'm in the industry and I understand how a loan is originated and the process. And still, when I was getting my mortgage, I felt helpless, not helpless, confused about what I felt kind of like, I'm treading water here. I'm swimming around. I don't know where I'm going. Don't know what I'm doing.
Oh
And that's
man.
for somebody that's in the industry. I can only
Yeah.
imagine what it's like for my friends that are first-time homebuyers that work in accounting or as teachers or whatever it might be. How
Yeah, if a
tough.
mortgage VIP like you can't get treatment or information at your fingertips to make you feel confident and comfortable, then what chance does anybody outside the industry have? So I think that's a fantastic example of like where we need to be able to do better quickly to answer Alan's question. But then two, I also think we in the industry are comfortable with the overcomplication of daily product and pricing, for instance,
Mhm.
and how that affects consumer rate locks, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if you were going to start from first principles, I think there's a lot of ways to communicate this to consumers in a cleaner, easier way. Like, what are you solving for? And I will serve up the information that best meets your goals. That's what technology is really good at. Taking in the what do you want to do today and then translating it into steps or translating into at least putting you with the right person at the right time. So we want to use tech. I mean, this show is about using technology for what technology is good at and not determining that technology can do everything. But we do think that this industry is over indexed on complexity and over indexed on people solving complexity because it's very difficult to take a step back when things are moving as quickly as they are and go, wait, do we really need to do that? Do rate sheets really need to have 18 pages of tables and add-ons and all this different stuff? Could we delegate that to technology? Could we delegate that, make that a little easier by using a machine to tell us what the optimal pricing is for a particular situation without having to manually calculate all the different pluses and minuses? Yeah, like that's where that digital experience is going. Talon's question.
Sweet. We're at our 45-minute mark.
Oh
So I think
man, thank
that's
you.
going to be goodbye for this week. I'm sure we have something cool in store for you next week. Jeremy, I won't put you on the spot if you don't know exactly what it is yet. But appreciate the people that tuned in to today's show. The show will be available on YouTube later. Jeremy, thank you for your time. Appreciate you. Any closing remarks for the people here?
Thank you, Robbie, and thanks everyone for joining. We look forward to jumping back into this next week. And for now, this is what's next.
And we'll see you later.